Hello friends, today's special lecture Symbolic Expression is on the topic post-COVID transformations in entertainment sector, and in the studio as sign language expert we have Manisha Sharma with us. And in the course of our discussion today we'll talk about that after COVID the kind of changes which have come in the entertainment sector, that how the various kinds of entertainment sectors, for example cinema, for that matter the OTT platforms, television, so all of them, they have witnessed a number of changes over a period of time, and as a result of the COVID pandemic we find that the entertainment sector also underwent a lot of change. So in that context, when we try to see that how during the times of COVID, OTT or the over-the-top platform, it became very, very important during that time, as cinema halls, they were closed, and many of the films of that time which were ready even for the release, they were delayed because of that, and because of the COVID we find that people, they were not going out. So these kinds of channels, Netflix, Zee, etc., all of them, they became very popular at that point of time, and how during that particular period laptops and the smartphones, they became the television screens or cinema screens for so many people, and that is why we find that there was a lot of surge in terms of subscription of these kinds of entertainment networks. We also see that because of COVID during that particular period, we find that people, they were not able to go out for not only cinema halls but for other recreational activities apart from them. So they did not have much choice, so they depended on these channels, etc., for their entertainment needs. In the course of our discussion we'll also see that the various kinds of references could be seen, that some articles in Indian Express, Hindu, all of them, they were being written, or reports from PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC, they were also there, and how they tried to convey the kind of changes which were happening in the market. And when it talks about films or television or OTT, all these kinds of platform, we find that how visual medium is an important medium, in that sense that how it is able to convey the ideas in a more emphatic manner than any other kind of communication or education. So in that sense it is a powerful tool in guiding and enlightening on the various socio-economic, political, cultural and academic issues, and how cinema or television or OTT platform, they are able to create a lot of impact on the masses when they are watching these kinds of programs which are available on these networks. And we have also seen that various kinds of series which have been started on these various platforms, they have also garnered a lot of viewership because of the fact that people at their convenience could see all these channels, which is not possible many times in the case of cinema, because you have to go to cinema halls to watch a film. So when we find that these kinds of changes which came during the post-COVID times, some of the changes over a period of time have also happened in the film industry, especially after the 1990s. We find that was the period of the globalization, and many new trends could be seen during this particular period. A lot of changes came in the production, exhibition and the consumption of films, and the real change basically could be seen especially during the times of COVID and thereafter. But even when we see the background of the 1990s, we find that a number of changes in the context of the liberalization of the economy could be seen during this time, and we also see in the 1990s and thereafter more and more participation of women in the public life could be seen, and because of which we find that more women could be seen in the entertainment sector, as well as script writers, as directors, and they were there in terms of numbers, they were high in the production sector as well, where we find that in the film production we find more number of women, they are being engaged in different kinds of works which are available. Then we also see that in the 90s a number of economic opportunities, they also increased during this particular period, and because of the availability of so many economic opportunities in different sectors, even when the television was also growing that time, we find the coming of a number of news channels during the 90s, and we also see that the arrival of the cable television network, it also provided that so many new channels could be seen on the cable television, and thereafter the coming of the DTH or the direct to home and other kinds of revolutions in the information technology, all of them, they provided some kind of thrust to or the people, those who wanted to in a way carry forward their ideas in different spheres. And we also see that this kind of a change also led to internationalization of the production, distribution and the consumption of films, that many of the films which were not being released in other parts of the world, they were also only being released in India. Now they were also released at international level. And we also see that so many films from Hollywood or from other regions, they were in a way dubbed in Hindi or in other regional languages, and they were being shown in India. So this kind of exchange of films from India to other parts of the world, or films from other parts of the world to India, was a new kind of an experience. It does not mean that films, they were not coming in earlier times as well. They were there, but their numbers were less when you see in 1990s and thereafter. These kinds of changes, they were happening, and it was also possible because of the coming of the multiplexes. We find that even the smaller films with low budget, they could also be exhibited in these multiplexes, where the numbers, those who were sitting in a cinema hall, were comparatively less when you compare them with a big screen theater. In bigger screen theaters, you had a capacity of 1200 to 1500, but in multiplexes you had smaller auditoriums of maybe 150 or 200. So that in a way was some kind of a boon to the smaller films, or the films which were there for the target audience. It was a nicer thing in that, from that point of view. And big studios, we also find during this time that many films, they were there on the floor of the big studios. They were simultaneously making 5 to 7 or maybe 10 films, and how they were trying to juggle the budget of these films. They were trying to juggle the sets and the costumes which were available. So all that was also happening, and because of which we find that many of them, they were well organized film factories, and how the films, they were being shot on the fixed schedules, in which in a way led to the cutting of the budgets. Less stock was being used, recycled sets, they were also being used. So we find that there was a lot of time which was being given to the pre-production preparation, and the production costs, they were being decreased that way. We also see in terms of film finance, institutional bank loans, private equity, venture capital from the institutions, all of them, they were being made available to the people, those who were involved in the films. And crowdfunding also in a way was there, so that the cost of the film could be recovered by people, those who were giving money through this kind of an approach. And we find that all of them, they were being recognized as producers or co-producers of the film. And Oni's it won the 2 national awards. It was a crowd-funded film as well. And all the 400 investors in this particular film, they were being acknowledged as co-producers in the film, and they also share the profits as well. And how we find that it reduces the risk of the investment, and various members who are part of the funding, they are able to in a way share the cost among themselves. And Manthan of Shyam Benegal in 1976, which was based on the story of pioneering milk cooperative movement of the Varghese Kurian, who was considered to be the father of white revolution in India, and which led to setting up of a large milk cooperative in Anand and Gujarat. So it was a crowd-funded film, and we find that it was based on the issue of the rural empowerment. And it was first film in the world to be crowd-produced by the farmers of the Gujarat Cooperative Milk Federation. They contributed rupees 2 each for the production of the film. And thereafter we see that during the times of globalization in 90s, and thereafter we find a lot of changes they came in the film production techniques, and at the same time how they were trying to in a way share the talent pool as well, where we see that some technicians or people those who were associated with film in other countries, especially Hollywood, they were also collaborating with the Indians, where they came to India and they gave their input to the films in terms of working in them. And we also find that because of the big studios, the total budget of the films, they also increased. And post-COVID, we find that the way OTT platforms they were operating, the way films they were being made, the focus was on the script and the actors and not on the big stars. So on the OTT platform, we find that many of the films which were low budgeted, they were being made, a number of series, etc. They were also being made for the OTT platform, which in a way provided an opportunity to so many artists or actors, those who wanted to come into films but they did not have much opportunity. But OTT platform provided them this kind of an opportunity as well. And we find that generally in Indian cinema a number of songs they are there in a film, but on OTT platforms you were seeing many films where there were no songs. So it does not mean that in India films without songs were not made. Some of them they were being made, but largely when you try to see, most of the films they have songs, and they were largely some kind of exceptions in terms of films which did not have any kind of a song. And we find that a number of changes came in terms of exploring of the themes, that new kind of themes, or the way films they were being treated, that was also changing in these times. And we also find during this time that many of the films which were released in the foreign countries with large number of prints during this particular period, and it was an unimaginable thing a few years back, but it was happening during the times when the globalization of the economy had taken place, especially in the first decade of the 21st century. And we also see that all this which was changed during the times of the 1990s and thereafter with the arrival of globalization, liberalization and privatization, changed during the times of the COVID, when we find that so many cinema halls and theaters they were closed. As you can see on the screen as well, that during the times of COVID, how the film festivals they got cancelled or they got postponed as well, and the big releases of the films they were also being postponed, and how the shooting of the TV and the web series and films they were halted, they were stopped during this time, and theaters they were unable to screen films because of the norms of the government or the fear which was there because of the COVID-19 regulations. And when all this kind of a shooting was stopped, we find that how the daily wage employees they were struggling for their meals, and it was true of so many sectors including the film sector. And CINTA, or the Cine and TV Artist Association, which is a body of the TV and film artists, and how they came together during that time and they appealed to the Hindi film actors or the people those who were associated with the film industry to make a lot of donations and help the daily wage earners. And some of the film stars or film actors they in a way donated some kind of a money to CINTA and other organizations so that they were able to help the people those who were there in the film industry. We also see during this time that how because of the postponement of the films, because of the closing of the theaters, the economic activity was affected, and because of this we find that many people they were also struggling, those who were not directly into films but their livelihood was dependent on the films. And we find that the global box office dropped by billions of dollars during this time, and streaming has been a significant increase in popularity during this time, and how the stock of the film exhibitor has also dropped dramatically during this particular period, and many blockbusters originally scheduled to be released since mid-March 2022 have been postponed or they were cancelled. They were around the world. And if you tend to understand many of the films, for example, 83 was a film which was to be released during this time, but it could not be released and its release was delayed. And this film was based on the 1983 triumph of India in the field of cricket, where they became the World Cup champions. And if you see the budget of this particular film, which was seen to be 240 crores plus 20 crores for the publicity and advertising, so it came to somewhere around 260 crores. And we also find that there was a lot of interest cost on this budget due to the delayed release of the pandemic. So we find that 260 crore cost, and the recovery was around 180 crore from all the revenue sources. So this film was seen to be incurring a loss of 80 crores. Then during the times of pandemic, we find that when we are talking about OTT platforms, when you are talking about all these OTT platforms showing so many films and other entertainment content, so one of the most important films which became very popular during the times and which was seen by so many people during the pandemic was Steven Soderbergh's Contagion. This film was though made in 2011, but how it was trying to show the similarities of those times with the times of the pandemic, and it is the depiction of a similar kind of a crisis which the world was facing at that point of time. And the filmmaker sought some kind of an insight of the top epidemiologists to describe just how the pandemic started, operated, and finally ended. So how these people, those who were in a way concerned with these kinds of epidemics, and the people, those who were aware about these kinds of epidemics, they were trying to convey that any kind of the kind of a scenario which was exhibited in this particular film, it was trying to describe the probable start as scenario as a wet market somewhere in Asia, and how transferring of a coronavirus to a human host. So all these things, they could also be being visualized by the people at that point of time, because people were battling this kind of a situation. And we find that some of the film associations, Federation of the Western Indian Cine Employees WISE, and the Indian Film and Television Directors Association, they decided to halt the shooting of the films and the web series, and the major production houses like Balaji and Dharma Productions, Yash Raj, all of them, they called off all production activity. And various state governments, they also ordered the closing down of cinema halls as well. So this kind of a change came in the film industry and the scenario which was there. And we also see that during the times of pandemic and thereafter, how the women, they were being portrayed in the cinema or even the entertainment sector, it also underwent some kind of a change. And if you tend to understand cinema, we find that cinema is seen to be some kind of a male-dominated and male-centric industry, and how women, the way they have been portrayed in them is largely in terms of some kind of a stereotyping has been done. And if you see the themes, they have been explored from the male point of view, and how heroines, they have always been secondary to hero in terms of films. So we'll talk about these kinds of changes which we find during post-COVID, in terms of the portrayal of women, and in our next lecture. So thank you very much.